Chapter 3, Building the Reciprocity Project. So, when I started building the Reciprocity Project, it was, um, I thought it was going to be this like one-off thing that I would put this thing out on the internet and then that would be it. But it's turned out to be a much bigger thing and it's much more important in my life in a lot of different ways. So let me explain the whole Reciprocity Project. So it's a platform to help researchers deal with the ambiguity of much of research life. And the idea is to create a platform where anybody at any stage can create non-rejectable research papers and be able to do that repeatedly and do it effectively, um, and have fun. And the key thing is to have fun when you're actually doing it and to make it kind of a joyous experience. And I thought this would be really easy to do this. So I had this inspiration driving home from Disney. My little kids were in the back car. It was just me in the car. My wife had to stay for a convention or a conference, and I was driving back. And I was mind wandering, and I had this idea. I was like, "Hey, why doesn't somebody actually build this thing? Why hasn't this been built where there's some platform to help researchers make their lives just easier in a lot of different ways, right? Like figure out a way that connect citizens of people that want to participate, and it doesn't necessarily have to be researchers, and create this kind of like platform that you've seen many times before, like things like Airbnb or um, Duolingo or Uber, where many people come together and they, play against each other is kind of a fun thing, but instead it's for doing research or producing intellectual property, where it's really exciting. And I was like, why isn't people doing this, right? Like, why nobody do this? And I got home and I mulled on it for about a month, and then I got super excited about it. In the middle of the night, I sort of wrote up what I was gonna do, and literally it was 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I was like typing away, writing this thing up because I thought it was gonna go the standard way of doing innovation at a university or entrepreneurship at a university. I didn't really I eventually got really frustrated, and I realized nobody else is doing this, so I'm going to do this thing. So I'm going to create some entrepreneurial venture and how we write about it in the books. And in the research is that there is this like researcher that goes and finds a couple of students. The students work in their garage, uh, and then voila, it turns into this big thing. Um, but that's not what happened, right? So I wrote up this thing, tried to get, I tried to. So first of all, nobody was really spectacularly interested. There was a couple of people that were kind of, and I'm not saying like none of this is a poor reflection on my university. It's a reflection of the entire system, and that's where I'm going to go in with a lot of this book. Is that um, it's often you that gets it and nobody else will, because the whole journey is extraordinarily dark, and everybody, including entire systems, are very sort of self-focused, right? And they don't want to expend extra resources to expand those boundaries because it's extraordinarily difficult to actually do that kind of stuff. um and so from their perspective, they were kind of like, um, and then I tried to work for, a year of trying to get this thing together through the technology transfer office. And eventually they were just like, well, here, you do it. We'll sign it off and you just do it. And we have a lot of people that do this kind of side project things in other areas. And why don't you just do this? And I'm like, okay. Um, But before I got there, I tried to get a team together of, finding students that were really, capable and great. And I found, a couple of really great people, but it just wasn't in their heart. Um, I tried to get other, you know, faculty that might be interested involved. It wasn't in their hearts at all to keep going and to do this thing. They're kind of like cursory and they're just like, whatevs. um, which I'm not blaming them. I mean, it's from my perspective entirely extraordinarily frustrating, right? But, but I'm not blaming them at all. I think that that was very wise on their part because it is a lot of work and there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes that nobody wants to actually do. And so I got, about a year in, I got frustrated and then I was like, "Ugh, nobody's going to do this thing. So I'm just going to get a contract developer to build this thing." And so I spent the time going through trying to find people on the internet, finally found somebody in the Ukraine, a group that looked really legitimate. They ended up charging me a whole bunch of money. And essentially, I felt I did not feel good in that transaction. I felt like I was getting, um, you know, they built something and then they disappeared without, a lot of help. And so I didn't feel good in that transaction. It wasn't something that I was positive about from that experience. And so that fell through. I put it on the internet. So first of all, they built it. It was kind of like, yeah, sort of. Um, and it sort of worked. And I put it on the internet. And I thought everybody would be super excited. This whole thing, I thought it was very cool. And I got like 10 likes on Facebook. Uh, and people were like, "Oh, that's cool," and that was it. And I was so dismayed after that, and I didn't know what to actually do. And I didn't at that time, I didn't understand how the internet worked. I didn't understand how culture works. I didn't understand a ton of things. I thought that that was all you had to do was to build something and then everything would be hunky dory. But that's not how any of this works. And so like somebody had told me, a friend of mine said, "Well, why don't you just do some YouTube tutorials?" And then I jumped on the internet. I was really nervous. Went on and before that, I was told by many people, don't go on the internet. It's kind of like a scary thing. You don't want to put too much information out there. It's kind of like on I wanted to participate on the internet, but I was too scared to actually do that. There was not a lot of confidence in my belly to do that, to stand up and say, you know what, this is important to me. And so I went on the internet and I started doing videos and really nothing happened. So then I started searching for videos and they were like, and I found a couple of people that were, as YouTube videos go, there's lots of scammy people. One of the ones were saying, all you had to do is to put put videos on the internet for 90 days, then it was 120 days or whatever. And then everything was going to work out in your favor and things were going to work on. It turned out that that was a great exercise anyways, even though I felt like I got scammed out of it. It wasn't, and I'm glad I didn't pay for anything at that moment. But I, um, I did that and I looked back, after doing that for so long, the things that were resonating with people were things that were often deeply personal. It's often about the experience of what it means to do research. Um, and I realized after that there is a lot on the internet about things where people do not understand what they're talking about. They're not practicing it. They're not going through the motions. And so they don't understand all of the despair. We have often two groups on the internet. There's one group selling a lot of how wonderful, doing research is. And that's usually like university, um, administrators, things like that are trying to sell the idea of university. And then on the other side, we've got a lot of people that were burnt and they feel really bad about the experience and they're very negative about it and selling a lot of negative. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be great as I started doing this, wouldn't it be great to be, and try to be as unbiased, but as open and authentic as I possibly can, so that people know that they're not crazy, so they know that yes, it is hard, and that there is a trade-off, and that often when you venture, coming back to the idea of this book, when you venture, it's extraordinarily challenging because you're taking away from today. Most people feel that taking away from today in education. They really feel it because it sucks, right? Everything about it sucks. Like it doesn't feel good. It requires a lot of expenditure of resources, like all of the basic stuff. If I ask my kids what they want to do, they want to play video games, right? And they're old enough to know better. And I think everybody is like that. It doesn't matter what, right? Like I don't like having my butt on a seat either, doing work. Um, and so I want to be honest about that. And I started being much more honest about it and being like, this is the real experience. But at the same time, as I started doing it, I realized that I need to tell the story about how I got here. What does that actually mean? Because it's so important to know why we do things in this world. And it's the same as you, right? Why do you do things? Often it has nothing to do with the education and getting ahead and all that kind of stuff anyways. It has to do with much more bigger things, why we actually do things. So I realized that that is a deeply important thing. So then I started being on all parts of the different of the internet, and sharing these stories as much as possible, so you don't feel afraid. And so that brings us to the whole idea of this book is I don't know what's going to end up with it. I've spent a whole bunch of money, like a boatload of money. Um, my wife just thinks I'm crazy at this moment. Um, Instead of buying boats and Lamborghinis and things like that, I build a website. Um, there's that. There's also dedicated a tremendous amount of time and effort into building something that I don't know if it'll ever work. And how am I going to define that it will actually work? I actually want the damn thing to be profitable because then it's sustainable. It actually becomes something then. People want to invest in it beyond some weird whack job nut. Um, that's important, right? To figure that out. But beyond all of that kind of stuff, people need to know the message when you venture off into things, when you do things like education, making a choice where you have, a family, where you become an entrepreneur or an innovator or any number of these different things. The classic story is, right? Like you have this gut feeling, everything, but that's not the case. None of this in this whole story that I just told you about did I know anything. And most of the time I did something because I felt like, I it often felt like I was getting hoodwinked, right? Or scammed. And it's a very deeply not positive experience with any of this stuff. Um, and I won't know what the answer is until 20 or 30 years from now, whether this was actually a good idea. I don't know any of that stuff. If this is proper, I know that this is not proper. I've run into many cases so far where it's uncomfortable to people that are directly close to me, um, that this is not the right thing that I should be doing. Nothing about this is right. I should be doing research, right? Like that's the key thing. That's the takeaway. I should be doing research. Anything devoting my time to a project like this is a waste of time. Um, that goes for anything where you're venturing and doing something. Having kids, there's nothing financially viable about having kids. There's nothing financially viable about getting married often, right? It's often difficult, financially difficult to do these things. And you have to get past that idea that you do things in the whole venturing aspect of things, of going off into something new because it is profitable and that there is something at the end of it. You hope, but that's not the way it is. What you feel and how you experience it is often very negative. You're taking away from today and you're you're investing in something that you have no idea what the outcomes actually are. In fact, those outcomes are often developed and growing. And if you stop, then those outcomes disappear. And you don't know whether you should stop or continue on or not. There is nothing that tells you you're doing the right thing. And it's the same as any entrepreneurial, educational, any venture in your life that deviates from the norm. You're going to feel this. And I want you to know the first message that you're going to get out of reading this book and thinking is you're normal. There's nothing wrong with you. To know that there is all of these challenges and negative experiences and all of that is totally normal. And I want you, instead of feeling like you're doing something wrong and that you are a problem, I want you to lean into it. Feel it. Feel all of those negative feelings, feel all of those things, and know that that is part of what it actually means to do what you're actually doing. Know that it's the real deal when you do that. That means you're doing the right thing. If people don't believe in you, if people want to discount you, if they never see what you are about, you are on the right path. That is the most important message you will take away out of listening to anything that I say, is to know that you are on the right path. No matter what you're choosing and what you're doing, your path is different. Other people are going to be very likely upset, more than likely completely indifferent. They don't care. And that is okay. And that's where you take a step forward and you say, well, I'm me, and that's okay. I'm going to do this crazy whacked out thing, and I'm going to continue doing this crazy whacked out thing because I think it's important to me. And that's the only thing that actually matters in all of this. All right. Take care. Have a wonderful day.